I used to think void silence was empty. It's not. Out here in the Vale, even the quiet has weight. Every creak of the hull, every distant thrum of the reactors, every unspoken memory hanging between these warriors who no longer have a name. The flagship of the 19th doesn't bear a livery, no proud sigils, no aquila carved in gold. From the outside, it's just another dead relic drifting among dim stars, but inside, it breathes, a ship full of ghosts that never died. My quarters are small, smaller than the cell I had on the Shrine World. A bunk, a desk, a lumen, and a single device that marks me for what I've become. A black-bound codex, its cover etched with a broken serpent. The Ouroboros, the symbol of the forgotten. I am no longer a remembrancer of the Imperium. No departmental seal, no administratum stamp. Now, my title is simpler. Archivist, no division. No rank, just the one who remembers what must never be written. Every day begins the same way, a chime over the vox, a list of names read in a low, solemn cadence, not roll call, obituaries, a litany of brothers who once existed and now exist only here, in this ship, in the minds of a dwindling few. I walk the same route each morning, through the gun decks, past the training cages, where giants spar in silence, their movements heavy with exhaustion rather than fury, through the shrine hall, if you can call it that. There is no Imperial eagle here, no candles for the Emperor's glory, only a single slab of obsidian, unmarked, surrounded by armor plates hung like offerings. I asked one of them, once, "What do you worship?" He answered, "Memory." The first time I entered the Strategium, I almost turned around. 6 Astartes stood around a hollow table, armored, scarred, each bearing a kind of stillness that felt more dangerous than rage. At their head was the same warrior who judged me when I arrived, the one they call Prefect. His true name is gone, burned, by his own hand from every record. He looked at me as I stepped through the hatch. "Archivist," he said, "you're late." I checked my chrono. "I'm early," I replied. He nodded once. "Then you're late to the habit of assuming we start before you arrive." It was the closest thing I'd heard to humor in days. They don't treat me like an equal. How could they? I'm a mortal among demigods who have chosen to amputate their own history. But they don't treat me like cargo either. I am a tool, a necessary risk. And every time I step into that chamber, I feel their eyes measuring me. Can he carry this? Will he break? Will he betray us, even by accident, in a moment of weakness? On that particular day, the hololith showed a world I did not recognize. A dim star, a cluster of outlying systems, faint warp echoes scrolling along the edge of the display. The prefect gestured to it. "The disturbance," he said. "It's growing." I frowned. "What disturbance?" He turned to me. "You felt nothing?" I hesitated. I'd been waking up with a pressure behind my eyes. Headaches, whispers at the edge of sleep I'd written off as stress and exhaustion. I assumed it was just the tomb, he finished quietly. "It isn't just anything." Another Astartes stepped forward, helm under his arm. His eyes were pale, almost colorless, and when they met mine, it felt like being weighed on a scale. "The sarcophagus stirs," he said. "Its grief bleeds into the warp. The veil muffles it, but others will hear." I swallowed. Others? Psionics, astropaths, unsanctioned sensitives. He looked back at the holo display. Already several shrine worlds report dreams, shared visions, 2 burning figures beside a golden throne. My blood ran cold. 2. "The lost Primarchs," I whispered. The room went very still. The prefect's gaze hardened. "Never speak that title here," he said. "Names are how ideas become plagues." I nodded, throat dry. "But if others are dreaming of them, doesn't that mean It means, another Marine interrupted, voice like stone grinding on stone, that containment is failing, he pointed at me, and it began to fail the day you heard them. My chest tightened. He wasn't wrong. Ever since I'd stood near that sarcophagus, ever since those voices had crawled into my skull, I'd felt linked, not owned, but noticed. You are a conduit, the prefect said quietly, a mortal mind that touched a wound in reality and survived. He leaned forward over the hololith. That makes you more dangerous than you understand. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the prefect straightened. You want to be our archivist, mortal? Then your work begins now. He pointed to the shifting warp signature on the display. You will study the disturbances, cross-reference them with Imperial reports, identify where the echoes of their memory are strongest. He paused. And then we will silence them. I swallowed hard. I used to chase truth. Now it seemed I was being asked to bury it. They call it the Council of Ash. Not officially. There are no official names here. No banners, no carved plaques. Just a room deep in the ship, lit by a single failing lumen globe, where the oldest of the 19th gather to argue about a past they are sworn never to speak. The first time I was allowed inside, I wasn't sure if it was an honor or a warning. The chamber was circular, its walls lined with slats of blackened ceramite. 8 Astartes sat around a low table, scarred by centuries of use. No thrones, no ornamentation. Only one object lay at the center, a shard of broken stone, veined with gold. I recognized it, a fragment of the mosaic I'd found on the Shrine World, the one that had started all of this. The prefect spoke first. The Archivist has compiled the initial pattern. Dozens of eyes turned toward me. I felt very small. I placed a data slate on the table. Over the last 3 standard weeks, I've traced 42 reported anomalies, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Most dismissed as minor warp disturbances, localized psychosis, or cult activity. One of the warriors grunted softly. In other words, he said, the usual noise of a dying Imperium. Yes, I replied, except these aren't random. I tapped the slate. The visions share a common structure, 2 luminous figures beside a central presence, a towering golden form, often faceless, sometimes crowned, sometimes wounded. I hesitated. In a few of the accounts, the golden figure is absent entirely. One of the older Marines shifted, and what remains, I swallowed. 2 brothers, alone, facing something unseen. A low murmur moved through the chamber. Not surprise, recognition. The prefect steepled his massive fingers. These dreams, do they cluster around anything? Yes, I said. Shrine worlds, mostly. Places already saturated with Imperial myth, but also places near old war zones from the Great Crusade. Worlds that once saw heavy Legion presence. I looked up. Worlds that were sanitized in the records. One of the other Astartes leaned forward, the light catching a jagged scar that ran from brow to jaw. You imply a connection, he said. Say it. I took a breath. The echoes are stronger where they fought, I said quietly. Where the lost sons bled, where they refused him. Silence pressed in. The shard of mosaic on the table seemed to pulse in the dim light. Blasphemy, one Marine said at last, not angrily, just tired. And yet, he looked at the others, it fits. The prefect's gaze stayed fixed on me. What of the Inquisition, he asked. What have they noticed? More than they admit, I said. Several Ordos have issued quiet redeployment orders, astropathic monitoring, seer screenings. They're looking for something they don't yet understand. And when they do understand, I met his eyes. They'll come here. For the first time, I saw something like fear move across those transhuman faces. Not fear of battle, not fear of death, fear of being seen, of being dragged back into the Emperor's light and judged all over again. One of the council members stood. His armor bore more scars than paint. He spoke without ceremony. "We've been hiding for 10,000 years, he said, guarding his sin, guarding him from his own truth." He looked around the circle. And for what? An Imperium that rots, a faith built on a lie, a galaxy that drowns in blood while we sit in the dark, nursing a wound that will never heal. Another Marine responded, voice low. "Our oath is all we have left." "Is it?" the first one snapped. "Or is it just another chain he put on us?" They argued, quietly, intensely, about duty, about loyalty, about whether protecting the Emperor's image still mattered in an age when his subjects suffer in his name. I watched them, giants, broken and unmade, still trying to decide if they were victims or accomplices. Finally, the prefect raised a hand. "Enough!" The chamber fell silent. He turned to me. "You said the echoes are strongest in one place in particular," he said. "Show us." I expanded the holo map. A single world pulsed at the edge of a fading trade route. A minor shrine world of no great note. On paper, in truth, something else entirely. Designation, Aurum Sanctus, I said. Population, a few billion. Prior status, unremarkable. But in the last cycle, they've recorded a surge of miraculous visions. I scrolled the data. Pilgrims dream of twin angels. Priests speak in voices they don't recognize. And one individual in particular has begun preaching about the brothers the Emperor betrayed. The words hung in the air like a drawn blade. One of the council members spat a curse in a dialect I didn't know. The prefect's eyes narrowed. "A prophet," he said. "A vector," another corrected. "A mirror," a third whispered. The prefect looked at the shard of mosaic in the center of the table, then at me, then at his brothers. "The Inquisition will go there," he said. "Soon. They'll dissect the prophet, sift the ashes, and if they find even a fragment of what we've hidden..." He didn't finish the thought. He didn't need to. At last, he spoke the words that set the next chain of events in motion. "We go first." He turned to me. "Archivist, you will accompany the strike." My heart stuttered. "Me? Yes," he said. "You are already bound to the source of these visions. If the echoes intensify, we need someone who can hear them and survive." He paused. "And if you can't, then we needed to know that too." The journey to Aurum Sanctus was short by Void standards, just long enough for me to start doubting every decision that had led me here. The strike cruiser we rode in was as nameless as the flagship, armor blackened, markings scrubbed, a vessel that had forgotten how to be proud. I spent the transit in a small observation blister, watching the warp flux smear the stars into impossible colors. It reminded me of the sarcophagus, the way reality had felt thin around it, stretched, bruised. I must have fallen asleep, because when the voices started, I wasn't really awake. At first, it was just a pressure, like someone placing a hand against the inside of my skull. Then, the words came, not spoken, not heard, simply there. We warned him. We begged. He chose. I saw flashes, not memories of my own. A marble hall bathed in cold, artificial light. 20 towering figures in armor, arguing in thunderous voices I couldn't quite hear. 2 of them stood apart. One calm, eyes full of sorrow. One blazing, fists clenched, rage held in check by sheer will. They weren't monsters. They weren't traitors. They were right, and it had destroyed them. I woke with a strangled gasp. A massive silhouette stood in the hatchway. The Marine who had first taken me from the shrine world. The one I now knew as Vigil. Not a name, a function. "You heard them," he said. It wasn't a question. I wiped blood from my nose. "Yes." His gaze didn't soften. "What did they show you?" I hesitated. "I saw a council, the Primarchs, 2 of them, standing against him, trying to stop what was coming. And he didn't listen." Vigil's jaw tightened. "That's their favorite lie," he said, the truth twisted just enough to wound. I frowned. "Lie? You told me they foresaw the heresy, that they warned him." "They did," he said quietly, "but they weren't the only ones, and he did listen, just not the way they wanted him to." He looked past me, out into the warp-smeared void. "Memory is not a perfect mirror, Archivist, especially when it's angry." Before I could press him, the hull shuddered. The warp tunnel peeled away. Real space reasserted itself in a flare of aching white. Aurum Sanctus lay ahead, a modest world wrapped in layers of orbital filth, pilgrim ships, processing stations, defense platforms that looked more ceremonial than functional. On the surface, a glint of light marked the planet's primary shrine city, home to a prophet who dreamed of forgotten sons. We descended under stealth protocols. No heraldry, no declarations, just a black shape slipping through layers of polluted atmosphere, unseen by Auspex grids that had long since fallen into complacent disrepair. In the drop bay, 6 Astartes prepared for insertion, armor sealed, weapons mag-locked. No chapter markings, only small personal sigils, carved on inner plates where no one would ever see. Vigil handed me a hooded cloak. "Wear this," he said. "Blend where you can, speak only if necessary." I smoothed the rough fabric. "And if they recognize me as off-world, then you tell them you're a pilgrim," he said. "In a way, you are." As we buckled into the drop transport, I felt the familiar tightening in my chest. Fear, yes, but also something else. Anticipation. Because for all the danger, all the horror, all the blasphemy I'd swum through, some part of me still wanted what I'd always wanted. To understand, to see the truth with my own eyes. The transport shuddered as we hit the upper atmosphere. Superheated air licked across the hull. Warning runes flickered and died. Vigil's voice came over the internal vox. Primary objective, assess the prophet's connection to the sarcophagus. Secondary, prevent inquisitorial acquisition of any deep echo data. Tertiary, leave no trace of our presence. One of the other Marines chuckled dryly. In other words, look, listen, erase. The transport punched through the last layer of cloud. The shrine city spread below us, sprawling hab blocks clustered around a central cathedral whose spires stabbed at the sky like accusing fingers. Pilgrim processions wound through the streets, tiny, ant-like lines of color and movement. From here, they looked almost peaceful. I knew better. No one travels to a shrine world because they are content. They come because they're desperate, for forgiveness, for meaning, for someone to tell them the pain matters. As we made our final descent, the pressure started again. Behind my eyes, behind my thoughts. Not words this time, images. The same cathedral burned. Those spires shattered. The sky above it ripped open, pouring not light, but memory. Millions of people staring upward, mouths open in silent screams as someone else's grief poured into them like molten glass. I gripped the harness until my knuckles went white. Vigil's voice cut into my mind like a blade. "Push it out," he said. "They're testing you. If you give them more space, they'll take it." I forced a breath. In, out. The images dimmed, but they did not vanish. We landed on the outskirts of the city in an abandoned processing yard. The ramp hissed open, smog rolled in, distant bells tolled. Somewhere, a crowd chanted in reverent fractured unison. Vigil stepped out first, a towering shadow wrapped in a distortion field that bent light around him. To the unaugmented eye, he would be little more than a feeling of being watched, unsettling, unplaceable. The others followed, spreading out into the deeper shadows. I pulled up my hood and stepped onto the ash-streaked ground. The air tasted like incense and rust. Behind the cathedral walls, the prophet awaited, and somewhere, far beneath a tomb world that should not exist, something smiled without a face. Part 4. The Heretic Prophet. Script begins. The streets of Aurum Sanctus smelled like devotion and exhaustion. Pilgrims shuffled past in ragged robes, clutching icons worn smooth by too many desperate hands. Vendors hawked relics, most fake, some real, all expensive. Above it all, the cathedral loomed. Not beautiful, not truly, just large. A monument to scale, mistaken for holiness. I moved with the crowd, head bowed beneath my hood. Vigil's voice crackled softly over the micro bead in my ear. Inner cloister secured. 2 of us in the rafters, 2 at the western transit gate. I'm in the shadow of the nave. You're clear to approach. I swallowed. Has the Inquisition arrived? Not yet, he said, but their ships are in system. Time is short. Inside, the cathedral was a forest of pillars and flickering lumen candles. Hundreds, no, thousands of people knelt on the stone floor, packed shoulder to shoulder. At the far end, on a raised dais before the altar, stood the prophet. He was smaller than I expected, thin, middle-aged, eyes ringed with exhaustion. Not a messiah, not a demagogue, just a man who'd seen something his mind couldn't carry alone. His voice rolled through the nave, amplified by a cracked vox halo above his head. They tell you he is flawless, the prophet said. They tell you he is perfect judgment, perfect wisdom, that all things he does are just. He smiled, and there was nothing kind in it. I have seen otherwise. A ripple moved through the crowd. Some recoiled, some leaned forward, greedy for scandal. He had 20 sons, the prophet continued. You know this. You build your faith on their stories, but there are 2 whose names you are forbidden even to imagine. He lifted a hand. Tell me, what kind of love erases its own children? The words hit me like a physical blow. I staggered, vision swimming, because beneath his sermon I heard them, the echoing voices from the tomb. He speaks truth. He remembers us. He bleeds with us. The prophet's gaze swept the crowd and stopped on me. For a heartbeat, it felt like someone else was looking out through his eyes. Someone older, vaster, broken and incandescent all at once. You, he said. The word cut through the murmurs like a blade. You've heard them too. Every head turned. I froze. Behind me, I felt Vigil's presence shift, a pressure in the shadows, ready to erupt. Careful, his voice whispered in my ear. Do not answer him with their words. The prophet stepped down from the dais. Guards moved to follow. He waved them back. Barefoot, robe trailing, he walked across the stone floor until he stood only a few paces from me. Your mind stinks of ash and steel, he said softly. You've been close to them, closer than I have, closer than they allow. He smiled, and tears ran down his face. They showed me you. I swallowed. What did they show you, exactly? He tilted his head, listening to something only he could hear. They showed me a man who still believes truth matters, he whispered, even after seeing what it costs. His eyes flicked to the vaulted ceiling, and they showed me the hunters in the rafters. Vigil swore under his breath. The crowd shifted uneasily, sensing tension without understanding it. The prophet's voice rose. You hide in shadows, he called, addressing the unseen Marines. You erase, you bury, you call it mercy, but what you guard is not the Imperium. He pointed toward the altar, where a gilded statue of the Emperor towered above us. You guard him from his reflection. A few in the crowd shouted in protest. Blasphemy! Heretic! Others nodded. Because once doubt has a voice, it never sounds entirely wrong. I felt the pressure building again. The sarcophagus, miles and worlds away, reaching through the thin places. Remember, tell them, make him face us. My knees wobbled. I forced myself to stay upright. What do they want? I asked the prophet quietly, so only he could hear. He laughed, a sound halfway between joy and despair. What does anyone abandoned by their father want? He replied. To be seen, to be acknowledged, to hear a single word. I was wrong. He leaned closer. You've been where they sleep. You've seen what he made from them. Tell me, Archivist, did he look sorry to you? The title hit me harder than the question. Archivist. He shouldn't have known that word, unless something was feeding it to him. Vigil's voice snapped in my ear. They're speaking through him, he said. We're out of time. At the far end of the nave, the main doors slammed open. Black-robed figures strode in, rosettes glinting in the lumen light. Inquisition. The crowd recoiled instinctively, like an animal smelling fire. The lead inquisitor raised a staff carved with sigils of judgment. By authority of the Golden Throne, he intoned, this gathering is declared heretical. The one called Prophet is to be taken into custody for interrogation. Vigil's voice dropped to a deadly calm. New objective, extraction and denial. The Prophet must not reach their ships. The air grew thick. I was caught between three hungers. The Inquisition's hunger to dissect the truth, the 19th's hunger to bury it, and the sarcophagus's hunger to be heard at last. The Prophet smiled at me sadly. Looks like we both have choices to make, he said. He turned to face the advancing Inquisitors. I will go with them, he announced, voice ringing through the cathedral. I will tell them what I've seen. I will tell them about the brothers he threw away. The pressure in my skull spiked. Say nothing, the voices hissed. Let him speak. Let the lie burn. Vigil's whisper cut through them. Archivist, decide now. Time slowed. I watched the scene as if from a great distance. The Prophet, arms spread, walking toward the Inquisitors. The crowd splitting, some falling to their knees, others clawing toward the exits. Shadows moved in the rafters. The 19th preparing to strike, and beneath it all, like a wound opening in the fabric of reality, the whisper became a roar. Remember us. Tell them. Let it end. I staggered, clutching my head. The cathedral dissolved. Stone became ash. Candles became stars. The statue of the Emperor cracked open like a shell, and I was somewhere else. Back in the tomb, back before the sarcophagus. Its chains glowed. Its surface crawled with symbols that weren't meant for mortal minds. Voices overlapped. Not two, not many, something in between. We remember your eyes, little Archivist. We remember your fear. We remember that you listened. I didn't choose to listen, I said, or thought. It was hard to tell. Choice is a luxury of the ignorant, they replied. You know now. That makes you ours. I shook my head. I'm not yours. I'm not his either. I just wanted the truth. A sound like bitter amusement echoed through the chamber that wasn't. Truth? The word twisted. Truth is a weapon. Truth is a plague. Truth is what we died for. Images slammed into me, legions marching under a sky split by war, two Primarchs standing before their father, voices raised, a hand of living light reaching out, not to comfort, but to command. You foresaw the heresy, I said. You tried to stop it. He refused. He refused to lose, they answered. He refused to admit that his design was flawed, so he cut away the parts that disagreed. Their grief was a tide threatening to drag me under. He regrets it, I said, without knowing why I believed it. Silence. Then, softly, regret is not the same as repentance. The scene shifted. I saw the sarcophagus being forged, not in a single moment, but over years, decades of hidden work, rituals, sacrifices, compromises with forces he claimed to stand above. a weapon, a failsafe, born from the souls he'd cast aside. He made you to prevent the heresy, I whispered. Number. He made us to control it, to decide which betrayals mattered. The weight of that nearly crushed me. All this time, I said, the Imperium has worshipped him as a god of order, a god of law, but he gambled with you, with them, with everything. Yes. The word was not triumphant, it was a tombstone. The pressure shifted, focusing. You stand where we cannot, little Archivist. In the cracks between lies and oaths. We cannot reach them alone. Our voice is scattered, our memory diluted. But you, they wrapped around my thoughts like cold fire. You could tell them. You could tell the galaxy what he did. You could force him to face what he became. In the distance, I heard echoes of real voices. Inquisitorial orders barked in high Gothic. The crack of last fire, the explosive bark of a bolt weapon. The cathedral was catching up with me. You want me to start a civil war, I said. We want you to start an honest one. Images flashed again, worlds rising in righteous fury, shrines pulled down, statues toppled. The Imperium tearing itself apart, not under the banner of chaos, but under the banner of disillusionment. The heresy all over again, not of sons against father, but of children against a god they never truly knew. I forced the images away. If I do nothing, I said, what happens? You die, they said simply, here, now, erased by hunters who fear what you know. And you? We continue as we are, trapped, leaking, turning more minds into prophets until someone listens or everything breaks. It wasn't a choice between good and evil. It was a choice between different species of catastrophe. You talk about truth like a cure, I said, but all I see are ways it can kill. They were quiet for a moment. Then, we never promised you a gentle salvation. The tomb flickered. The cathedral rushed back in. The prophet still walked toward the Inquisitors. The crowd roared, half in panic, half in fervor. Above, the shadows of the 19th moved. One of them dropped from the rafters, hitting the floor between the prophet and the Inquisition like a falling star. Armor of dull black, eyes burning behind his helm. Vigil. The Inquisitors recoiled. Unmarked Astartes, one hissed. Unknown heraldry, seize. They never finished the order. Vigil moved. Violence distilled. He didn't kill the prophet. He shielded him. For a heartbeat, even the voices in my head went still. You see, they whispered, even your wardens doubt their chains. Vigil's voice rolled over the crowd, amplified by the cathedral's old Vox grid. This man is under our protection, he said. You will not take him. The nearest Inquisitor laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. By what authority? Vigil turned slightly, and I heard something in his tone I had never heard before. Not obedience, not defiance, resentment, honed into something like faith. By the authority of the mistake he refuses to admit, he said. The Inquisitors raised their weapons. The 19th moved to meet them, and I realized, if this turned into a massacre here in a holy place, witnessed by thousands, the story would spread no matter what we did. Another kind of echo, another kind of war. The voices pressed in, choose. In the end, I did what I always swore I would do. I chose the story, just not in the way they expected. I stepped forward, into the open, between Vigil, the Prophet, and the Inquisitors, a tiny, fragile human figure, dwarfed by giants and the machinery of power. I raised my hands. Stop, I said. My voice shouldn't have carried. But the cathedral's old acoustics caught it, flung it outward, made it bigger than I felt. Please, I added, because at my core, I was still just a man begging forces beyond him to listen. For a heartbeat, they did. The bishop's choir fell silent. The pilgrims held their breath. Even the Inquisitors hesitated. One of them sneered. Who are you to command silence here? I met his gaze. I'm nobody, I said, and that's exactly why you should let me speak. The prophet watched me with something like pity. Vigil watched me with something like hope. The voices in my head watched me with something like hunger. Tell them, burn it all down. I took a breath. This man is dreaming of things he shouldn't, I said, gesturing to the prophet. He speaks of sons erased, of choices hidden. You want to take him apart to see where the dream lives. I turned to the Inquisitors. You won't find it, because it isn't his. They stiffened. What do you mean? One demanded. I looked up at the vaulted ceiling, as if I could see through it. Something old and wounded is screaming, I said softly, and your psychers, your prophets, your madmen, they're just the ones unlucky enough to be standing where the echo hits hardest. The crowd murmured. They didn't understand, not really, but they understood pain. They understood the idea of someone suffering so loudly it spilled into other minds. That's heresy, an Inquisitor snapped. You speak of entities that meddle with thought, warp spawn, demonic influence. Yes, I said, exactly. I let the word hang there. Warp. Let them file it into familiar drawers. Let them miss the shape behind it. You want to know the truth? I asked. The voices in my skull leaned forward. Yes. Yes, the prophet whispered. Yes, breathed the crowd. Even the Inquisitors, for all their suspicion, could not entirely hide their curiosity. I smiled and told my first true lie. It's not about the Emperor, I said. The words tasted like rust. It's not about hidden sons or buried histories. It's a wound, nothing more. A psychic scar left by wars long past, bleeding through the veil. It doesn't care about righteousness or betrayal. It just hurts, and anything that touches it hurts, too. I turned to the prophet. You looked at that wound too long, I said. You mistook its pain for revelation. His eyes filled with tears. I heard them, he whispered. I heard their names. No, I said gently. You heard grief. Your mind did the rest. The voices in my head recoiled. Liar. Coward. Traitor. For a moment, I thought they would crush me for that alone. Then, slowly, the pressure lessened. Not forgiven, not forgotten, but reconsidering. The Inquisitors conferred in harsh whispers. One of them finally stepped forward. If this is just residual warp trauma, he said slowly, then it falls under our purview. He pointed at the prophet. He still comes with us, for examination, for purification if necessary. I nodded. Of course. Vigil tensed behind me. I didn't look at him. You, the Inquisitor added, eyes narrowing at me, will accompany us as well. You seem unusually familiar with the nature of such disturbances. I forced a tired smile. I'm just an archivist, I said. I read too much, but if you want my testimony, you can submit a formal request to my superiors. He sneered. And who would those be? I see no sigil, no seal. I looked past him, to the shadows where the 19th waited, to the invisible fleet in the veil, to the tomb world where two souls waited patiently to see what I would become. The ones who remember what you're not supposed to know, I said. It wasn't an answer, but it was enough ambiguity for a man who lived on suspicion. He gave a curt nod. We will inquire, he said. He gestured sharply. Take the prophet. The guards moved in. The prophet didn't resist. He looked at me as they bound his hands. His eyes were full of betrayal. Coward, he whispered. You had a chance to speak for them. I shook my head. I spoke for everyone who would die if I did. He spat at my feet. Then you've chosen your God well. As they led him away, he began to hum, a low, broken tune. It took me a moment to recognize it. A lullaby, something ancient, something from a time before the legions, before the wars. A song a father might have sung to his children, if he'd ever known how. The 19th withdrew as silently as they'd come. No massacre, no open war, just another day in an Imperium that had learned to ignore the taste of blood. Later, back aboard the cruiser, Vigil confronted me in the Strategium. "You lied," he said. "Yes." "You protected the Inquisition." "No," I said. "I protected them from something they couldn't understand without breaking, and I protected us from the war that would start if they tried." He studied me. "And you protected him." I met his gaze. "Did I?" Silence stretched. Then Vigil did something I hadn't expected. He laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You are one of us now," he said. "You lie for the right reasons and hate yourself for it." He clapped a massive hand on my shoulder. "Welcome to the 19th. Later, alone in my cell, I opened the black-bound codex. My hand shook as I wrote. I recorded everything: the prophet's words, the Inquisition's arrival, my lie, and in the margins, a confession. I chose silence, not because it was right, not because it was just, but because, for now, it is the only thing holding the galaxy together. As I finished the entry, the voices returned, quieter this time. "We see you." I closed my eyes. "I'm not your herald," I whispered. "Number." The word was almost gentle. "You are our witness." A shiver ran through me, because that was the truth at the heart of all of this. I wasn't here to overthrow gods. I wasn't here to absolve them. I was here to remember, to carry a story so heavy it could never be spoken aloud, and to decide one day if silence was still mercy. Out in the Vale, the fleet drifted. The 19th prepared for whatever came next. On a tomb world of black stone, chains creaked softly around a sarcophagus that would not sleep forever, and somewhere on Aurum Sanctis, in an inquisitorial cell, a prophet dreamed of two brothers standing beside a throne, waiting, watching, hoping that when the time came, I would choose them.